Hey guys, Jeremy here with Simple Life. Today we're gonna make a knife, and I'm gonna do a few things that I've never done before on a knife build. The first thing I did was I designed my knife in Shaper 3D on my iPad. This is the blade we will be making, and the reason I wanted to do a digital design was I'm going to take my Gweike G2 Pro 30-watt fiber laser and use that to mark out the profile, including the exact hole locations for the bolts that we're going to use to bolt the scales on. All right, so we brought the knife into light burn, and I'm actually going to cut out a piece of cardboard first, just to make sure I like the feel of it in my hand. Wow. That has a really nice feel to it. Nice sweeping lines there. I can actually take this and use it to size the stock that I'm gonna need. It's a little too thick. I don't want it super chunky. So you've got some precision ground flat stock 01 tool steel, 1/8 by 2 inch. We'll cut up something like that. So now we're gonna go to frame. There, I think the whole thing's on. So I am using, with this 30-watt fiber laser, I'm 100% power, 100 millimeters a second, frequency of 20 kilohertz. Okay, let's just go for it. Ooh, that's freaking good. Oh, why didn't it do the whole thing? That's what I don't get. This thing is wigging out. It's the new version of Lightburn I'm having issues with. I don't know. I'm having some serious issues with Lightburn. I don't think it's the laser at all, because I downloaded the new version of Lightburn and it's been crashing like crazy. But here we go. We've got all our holes laid out. And as long as we properly profile to this line, these should all be nice and symmetrical, so we don't have to measure it out. There we go, all nicely profiled. Now let's pop in our holes. That feels good. All right, so this here is an optical center punch. And I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but you see there's little crosshairs in there? You take this little brass thing, place this in here, and as you look through those crosshairs, you could line that up. Yeah, just like that. And then, once you have it exactly where you want it, be careful not to move that. Take this out, put this in. Right, perfectly centered. They're actually a really cool tool. You see how it's perfectly lined up there? Bingo, bango, bongo. All right, so now that we've got our holes drilled, I'm going to put a little Sharpie right on this edge because we need to mark the center. Give ourselves a nice little grind line. Make sure this is nice and clean. Everything's sitting flat. Flip it over. So this is the Moen blade grinding jig, and I'm going to stick the knife through here. Got some nice carbide edges here. That's what we're going to line up to our plunge line. This should be a fairly simple grind. Okay. All right, we're just gonna see what this angle looks like. Should be pretty close. There you go. I like that. You can see just how easy it is with this jig. I have a dedicated video about this. If you want to check that out, I'll put a link up in the corner. But I absolutely love this jig. It makes it so easy. I kind of like that. I don't want these grinds going up too high. They're about even. And then, I don't know, we're probably like 30 thousandths of an inch at least. So we'll finish that off post heat treat. Very quick when you're starting out with thin stock. And obviously I didn't bring my plunge line all the way to where it's gonna be. I'm gonna want it to come even with this, but I'm gonna do that post heat treat. So we've got the kiln fired up, and we'll put it in for a 1600 degree soak for 20 minutes, and then we'll quench it in oil. Now I'm going to take out my piece of angle iron that I put in there, use that to warm the oil. Oh good, we got fireballs. That's what everybody likes to see. Oh, that stinks. Ugh. Whoa, boy. Okay, check the temperature of our oil. So we're about 180 degrees Fahrenheit, which is fantastic. Pull out the knife. 1, 2, quencheroni-roo. Looks nice and straight to me. We're gonna let our oven come down to 400. And once we're at that, we'll do 2 tempers, 400 degrees Fahrenheit for 2 hours each. All right, so we are finished with the heat treat and the 2 temper cycles. This is what the blade looks like at the moment. Now, what I'm gonna do with this, the easiest way I found to clean this up, depending on the finish you want at the end, but I'm just gonna throw it in my sandblaster, blast this. Once that's done, we can go ahead and finish out the bevels, and then we will find the handle material, and I'm thinking about using Ultum? Altum? I don't know what it's called. We'll see. All right, looking much better now. Now we'll go and put our final grinds in. All right, so we do have a little bit of a warp, ever so slightly. It's kind of going this way. So I'm going to take the carbide tip straightening hammer. This one here I bought from Kyle Daly of KH Daily Knives. We're just going to give it a couple of taps. Oh, that has made a huge difference already. Do just a couple right here. Very, very light taps. Is all it takes. That is nice and straight now. Tell you, if you don't have a straightening hammer, you should get one. All right, back into the jig we go. The nice thing with using a jig like this, as long as I don't grind other blades in between, which I haven't, this angle is set up exactly to what we roughed the bevel in at. Okay. Walk it down. Over we go. I call that good. I was going to put a sharpening choil in there, but I think I'm actually going to leave it because I like seeing that plunge line come right even with this little tab. And that's kind of a cool look. So, sandblast it, vibratory tumbler. We'll see how it looks after that. Okay, so this is the finish outside of the tumbler. I like that you can still see the grind lines there, and I really like this matte finish, but I did this a little bit prematurely. I haven't fit the scales to this yet, so we're gonna go ahead, I'll clamp the scales onto here. We'll drill a 1/4 inch hole first, just to find our center, and then we'll go through it with a smaller hole because we're gonna use smaller bolts, and there will be a little aluminum standoff in here, and then we'll bolt it from the scales on from either side. So let's go ahead and do that, and then I will have to throw this back into the tumbler after I profile the scales to the tang of the knife. So these are the Ultim scales, translucent. I think it's gonna be really cool when we laser etch a pattern under here. All right, gonna use my 1, 2, 3 blocks. This first hole is just gonna be for reference. Just making a little divot in there that I'll use to start a smaller bit. Four very nicely centered holes. While we're still clamped in, just scratch my outline. All right, so off camera, I forgot to film it, but I counterbored these holes on the inside of the scale, and this is the standoff that I'll be using, a little aluminum standoff with an 832 thread. And I just did a little bit of measuring, a little trial and error, but I got it nice so that this goes in there, the tang goes in there, the other one on top, and it's a pretty good fit. A little bit of clearance, and what I need to do now is just countersink the top side, the outside of the scales, so that I can put in a countersink screw and it'll set flush. I've got this set up with a stop. I've measured it out. So that should give me the right depth. This Ultim machines really nicely, but it also kind of gets a little sticky. So I've got a 3-footed countersink, and I find that as soon as I go down, it just kind of gums up in there, so I'm having to do a whole bunch of bites. But that's all right. Every material has its little way that it likes to be worked with. So that's great, nice and flush. Check everyone as we go, very nice. Should be good for profiling. I'm really gonna like this. All right, so with those scales taken care of, we are going to add some jimping to this blade. I've laid out an array, actually let me show you here in Lightburn, of rectangles, and I'll show you the settings I'm using for this. So the first layer is 100% power, 20 kilohertz frequency, and we're doing crosshatch, and it's in fill mode. So we're going to do 10 passes of that. And then the second one is 20% power. We're going to actually bump that up to 40. This will be a cleanup pass, and we're doing 80 kilohertz frequency, and again a crosshatch, and we're going to do 3 passes like that. And I might have to run that 2 or 3 times, but it should give us some decent jimping here. And once that's done, then we'll go ahead and sandblast this thing once again and throw it into the vibratory tumbler. I did some testing, some camo patterns. I'm going to be putting this on here so you'll see it through the scales. I think it should be cool. So this here is just a sacrificial piece we're going to lay down. Quite a simple setup. Just going to use a little spring clamp here to hold the knife. The scale's in there. We'll start our jimping. Let me make a little mark. I'm going to start the jimping here. Now once we commit to this, we're not going to want to move it, so I think everything looks good. Let's go ahead and run it. Okay, we're going to run it again. Going a little deeper. Okay, so that's 30 passes. We're going to run one more. So it would be a total of 40 passes. All right, there we have our jimping cut in. Not super aggressive, but definitely feels good. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to sandblast the spine, and then we'll put this whole thing into the tumbler again, get a nice uniform finish on the whole thing, and then we'll laser etch our pattern in that will go underneath the scales. Oh, I also took the fasteners and I tumbled them as well, so I have the same finish. There's an untumbled one, it's kind of shinier, and then the tumbled one is a little bit more matte. This one's tumbled. Alrighty folks, here it is out of the tumbler. I really like the way the tumbler just kind of knocked the harshness off that jimping. And you see it turned out pretty good. It's very, very comfortable, functional. So the last part of this build is I'm going to put this camo pattern onto the blade. And the way I'm going to do that is I printed this little, I did a couple versions, but this is a little relief. And I used this profile to mark out the handle scales. So I 3D printed these little recesses for some rare earth magnets so that when I go put these scales on, I'll use these as a reference, exactly where they're going to be. I'll put my little mask on there, and hopefully it'll stop it right where the scales start. It's the part that I'm the most nervous about. Okay, so I've got a sacrificial piece of steel there. This is the camo pattern I'm going to use, and the settings I have, I've got 800 millimeters a second, 50% power at 80 kilohertz frequency. I don't know what it's going to do to the magnets. Hopefully it'll be okay. And what we can do, since we don't need to etch all of this, let's just see roughly where we're at. So we can actually start the job partially into it. So we'll come up here, go to our preview, and this is where, so we can actually start the job like right there. We'll go right there, start here. Okay. Let's see what happens. Well, the mask is holding up well. And there we go, hit stop. Okay, I'm gonna call that good. Here's the moment of truth. It worked. It worked. You can see that very subtle pattern in there. I like it. Okay, let's do the other side. I can't believe that worked. I'm stoked. And actually what I'm going to do, I'm going to mirror this image so that we have similar patterns. There, mirrored. And we're done. There we go. We got our pattern on both sides. Let's see how this one works. Oh, look at that. Look, the mask worked perfectly. Okay, let's put this sucker together. All right, so the last thing I'm gonna do is put on my maker's mark. Looks good. Like that. I'm really happy with how the blade turned out. I didn't know for sure if it was gonna work with etching underneath the scales, but I like it. It's subtle, it's not super strong. I didn't want a really dark etch like I do my maker's mark. I wanted something that was a little bit more shiny, and I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. Obviously, I need to prove that it is sharp. It's very sharp. Nice and slicey. That was a fun build. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you have a fantastic day. Cheers.